I never thought silence could hurt more than shouting. But the day my grandpa yelled at me outside the shelter, my life changed forever. Before I begin, let me say this gently. If you have ever been judged by the people who were supposed to protect you, if you have ever stayed quiet while someone misunderstood your pain, then this story is for you. Take a slow breath, tap the like button. If this kind of story speaks to you, subscribe, and stay with me, because this is not a loud revenge story. This is a quiet one built on sadness, patience, and survival. My name is Clara, and this is something I lived through, even though my family never truly saw it. I grew up in a small house where the walls were thin and opinions were strong. My grandparents raised me after my mother passed away. My grandpa believed in rules, discipline, and reputation. He believed that people only failed because they were not trying hard enough. He was not a cruel man, but he was not a gentle one either. My grandmother was different. She moved softly through the house. She cooked, cleaned, and listened more than she spoke. When she hugged you, it felt like she was afraid to squeeze too hard. As a child, I tried to be good in every way I could. I studied hard, I kept quiet, I followed rules. I wanted my grandpa to be proud of me. I wanted to prove that raising me had been worth it. When I turned 19, life began to slip through my fingers. I lost my job first. It was nothing special, just an office job, but it paid the bills. The company let people go, and my name was on that list. I didn't tell my grandparents. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I would fix it before anyone noticed. Weeks passed, then months. My savings disappeared slowly, then all at once, meals became smaller, sleep became harder. Eventually, I lost my place to stay. That was the word I used in my head, not home, just a place. The shelter was quiet in a way that felt heavy. People there did not ask questions. Everyone carried their own story, folded tightly inside. At night, I lay on a narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. I wondered how I had fallen so far without making a sound. I wondered how shame could be so loud inside, yet invisible to everyone else. During the day, I cleaned myself up and left early. I fixed my hair. I practiced looking normal. I still went back to my grandparents' house sometimes. I told them I was working late. I told them I was busy. I hated lying, but I was more afraid of disappointment. One afternoon, as I stepped out of the shelter, I heard my name, Clara. I froze before I even turned around. I knew that voice. My grandpa stood across the street. His face was red. His jaw was tight. "What are you doing here?" he shouted. People slowed down. A few stopped walking. My throat closed. I tried to speak, but no words came. "You going in and out of places like this?" he said. "Is this what you've become?" I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell him I was trying. I wanted to say I was tired, scared, and doing my best. But I stood there in silence. "Come home," he said sharply, "and don't embarrass us like this again." Then he turned and walked away. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not loudly, not in a way anyone else could see. That night, I did not go home. I sat on the shelter bed and stared at my hands. They were shaking. For the first time, I understood something clearly. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask why I was there. He only cared about how it looked. That hurt more than hunger, more than cold, more than being alone. So I made a quiet decision. I would stop explaining myself. I would stop begging for understanding. I would build my life without announcing it. I started volunteering at the shelter. Helping others helped me stay grounded. Listening to their stories reminded me I wasn't broken, just human, someone. Helped me rewrite my resume. Another practiced interview questions with me. Slowly, things changed. I found a small job, then another. I saved every dollar I could. I stayed quiet. That silence became my strength. Years passed. I moved into a tiny apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I worked hard. I studied at night. I earned a better position. One day, a letter arrived from my grandmother. She wrote that my grandpa was sick. She asked me to visit. I held that letter for a long time. When I finally went back, the house felt smaller than I remembered. My grandpa sat by the window. His hands looked thinner. He looked at me and said softly, "I heard you're doing well." I nodded. After a long pause, he said, "I was wrong." That was all. No shouting, no excuses, and somehow it was enough. I learned something through all of this. Not all revenge needs noise. Not all strength needs anger. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is survive quietly and let time speak for you. If this story stayed with you, take a moment and like this video. Tell us in the comments if you've ever chosen silence instead of revenge, and subscribe for more real stories told with honesty and heart. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the loudest victory is the life you build without saying a word. The weeks after that visit were strange for me. I thought seeing my grandpa again would reopen old wounds. Instead, it left me feeling quiet and thoughtful, like a chapter had closed, even if it never fully healed. I went back to my apartment and sat alone that night. The lights were low. The room was silent. I could hear my own breathing, slow and steady. I realized something then. For years, I had been living to prove something, not to the world, not even to myself, to him. And now that he had admitted he was wrong, even in just 2 words, I felt a strange emptiness. Not pain, not anger, just space. I kept going to work the next day, and the next. Life did not pause for realizations. At the office, people knew me as quiet Clara, reliable, always early, never complaining. They didn't know where I had come from. They didn't know how many nights I had cried silently into a thin pillow, and I liked it that way. There was peace in being unknown. I kept in touch with my grandmother after that. Short phone calls, simple words. "How are you eating?" she would ask. "Are you sleeping enough?" I could hear worry in her voice, even when she tried to hide it. I told her I was fine, because this time, it was true. My grandpa never spoke much when I visited again. He listened more, watched more. Sometimes I caught him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. His eyes were softer now, tired. One afternoon, while my grandmother was in the kitchen, he spoke again. "I didn't know how hard things were for you," he said. His voice was low. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice yet. He cleared his throat. "I thought being strict would make you strong." I wanted to say a lot of things. I wanted to tell him how lonely I had felt, how small his words had made me feel that day outside the shelter, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "I learned to be strong anyway." He nodded slowly. That was all. I understood then that forgiveness does not always come with long talks. Sometimes it comes with acceptance. Sometimes it comes with silence. Life moved forward. I continued to grow in my work. I saved more. I traveled a little. Nothing big, just small trips that made me feel free. I stood by the ocean once and let the wind hit my face. I thought about how close I had come to giving up, and how no one there knew that that was okay. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from someone I used to know at the shelter. She had found housing. She thanked me for listening to her when she felt invisible. I cried that night, not from sadness, from gratitude. I had survived something quietly, and in doing so, I had learned how to sit with other people's pain without judgment. That was the real reward. Years later, when my grandpa passed away, I stood at the back of the room during the service. I listened to people talk about his strength, his discipline, his pride. They weren't wrong, but they weren't complete either. I placed my hand on the chair where he used to sit, and in my heart, I said goodbye, not with anger, not with blame, just understanding. Now, when I think about that day outside the shelter, I no longer feel that sharp ache in my chest. I feel calm. I know who I am. I know what I survived, and I know that I never need to shout to prove my worth. If you're listening to this and carrying a quiet pain of your own, I want you to know something. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your healing. You don't need applause to be strong. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is living a peaceful life. After everything settled, I thought life would finally feel steady. But healing does not move in a straight line. It comes in waves. Quiet ones that arrive when you least expect them. There were nights when I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The room was safe. The door was locked, yet my chest still felt tight. I would hear my grandpa's voice in my memory, not the shouting, the disappointment. It surprised me how long those echoes stayed. During the day I stayed busy. Work helped, routine helped. But silence has a way of bringing old thoughts back. One evening after work I passed by the old neighborhood. I didn't plan to. My feet just carried me there. The shelter building was still standing. Same doors, same steps. I stopped across the street. I didn't go inside. I remembered the girl I was back then, how small I felt, how ashamed. I whispered softly, "You survived." No one heard me, and that was okay. The next few months brought changes I didn't expect. People at work started to notice me more, not because I asked for attention, because I was steady. My manager asked if I wanted more responsibility. I hesitated before saying yes. Part of me was still afraid of failing again, afraid of falling too far too fast, but I said yes anyway. That was another quiet victory. With more responsibility came more pressure. Some days were heavy, some nights were long. But this time, I wasn't alone inside myself. I had learned how to sit with discomfort, how to breathe through fear. I had learned that strength didn't mean never breaking. It meant breaking quietly and still moving forward. I started setting boundaries with my family, nothing dramatic, just gentle distance, shorter visits, fewer explanations. My grandmother understood. She always had. She once said to me, "You carry things deeply." I smiled at that. It was the first time someone had noticed without judging. There were moments when I thought about telling my full story, about the shelter, about the nights I cried myself to sleep, but each time I decided not to, not because I was ashamed anymore, but because I didn't need their validation. My story belonged to me. One afternoon I received a message from someone younger than me. A coworker. She said she was struggling. She said she felt lost. We sat together during lunch. She spoke quietly. I listened. I didn't give advice. I didn't fix anything. I just listened. Later that day, she thanked me. She said, "You make people feel safe." I walked home that evening with tears in my eyes. That was when I realized something important. All that pain had changed me, not into someone bitter, but into someone gentle. Life kept moving. Time kept passing. I learned to enjoy simple things. Morning light, warm tea, the sound of rain on my window. Peace became my quiet reward. Sometimes late at night I thought about revenge, not the loud kind, not the kind that RTS, but the kind where you live well. And I smiled. Because I was already doing it. There was a moment, much later, when everything inside me finally shifted. It didn't happen during an argument. It didn't happen during a big life event. It happened on an ordinary day. I was cleaning out an old box in my apartment. Just papers, old notes, receipts I didn't need anymore. At the bottom, I found a folded piece of paper. It was my old resume, the one I had carried with me when I stayed at the shelter. The paper was worn. The edges were soft from being folded and unfolded so many times. I sat on the floor and held it in my hands. For a long time I didn't move. I remembered how afraid I had been back then, how every rejection felt like proof that my grandpa was right, that I wasn't enough. I felt tears come, slow and warm, not from pain, from release. I realized something in that moment. I had been carrying his voice inside me for years, measuring myself by his expectations, judging myself by his standards even after he admitted he was wrong. I had still been trying to prove something, but now, I didn't need to anymore. I folded the resume carefully and placed it back in the box, not to hold on to pain, but to honor survival. That night I slept deeply, without old dreams, without tightness in my chest. In the weeks that followed, I noticed changes in myself, small ones. I laughed more easily. I rested without guilt when mistakes happened. I didn't punish myself. I learned. That was new. One afternoon, my grandmother called me. Her voice sounded tired. She said, "I worry about you carrying too much." I paused before answering. "I'm lighter now," I said softly, and I meant it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad." I understood then that healing doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need approval. It happens when you are ready to let go. There was no dramatic confrontation, no long speech, just a quiet turning point. I stopped living to prove my worth and started living because I already had it. That was the day my heart finally chose peace. After that quiet turning point, life began to feel different. Not easier, just softer. The days no longer felt like something I had to survive. They felt like something I could step into without fear. I still worked hard. I still planned carefully, but the pressure inside me was gone. I noticed it in small moments, when I woke up without dread, when I made mistakes and didn't replay them all night. Peace showed up gently. I started saying no when I needed rest. I stopped apologizing for taking space. That was something I had never done before. My relationship with my family changed too. There was more silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was respectful. My grandmother and I talked often, sometimes about memories, sometimes about nothing important. She once said, "Your mother would be proud of you." I had to sit down when she said that. Those words filled a space inside me that had been empty for years. I visited my grandpa's old chair one afternoon. The house was quiet. Sunlight came through the window just the way it always had. I sat there and remembered him shouting, and then I remembered him whispering, "I was wrong." Both memories existed together now. Neither controlled me. I didn't need revenge anymore because I wasn't hurt in the same way. I had grown beyond that moment. I realized something important. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing not to live inside the wound. I continued helping others when I could, listening, being present. People trusted me with their stories. I held them carefully. That felt meaningful. One evening, I stood by my window and watched the city lights. I thought about how far I had come without announcing it. No one clapped. No one apologized properly. And that was fine. My life had become my answer. I had built something. Quiet and steady. Something no one could take away. That was enough. Now, when I look back on everything, I don't feel bitterness. I feel understanding. Life did not break me the way I once feared it would. It bent me. It shaped me. I learned that not all pain needs to be confronted. Some of it needs to be outgrown. The day my grandpa shouted at me outside the shelter will always be part of my story, but it is no longer the center of it. The center is what came after, the quiet choices, the slow rebuilding. I learned to trust myself, to believe my worth did not depend on approval. That lesson stayed with me. When hard moments come now, I don't rush to explain myself. I don't rush to defend. I pause, I breathe, I choose peace. That is the kind of strength no one taught me. I had to learn it on my own. If you are listening to this and carrying a heavy silence inside you, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not weak for staying calm. You are not small for choosing peace. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is not proving someone wrong. It is proving yourself right. Living gently, living honestly, living free. If this story touched you, take a moment and like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever chosen quiet strength over loud revenge? And if you want more real-life stories told slowly, honestly, and with heart, subscribe and stay with us. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are right now, may you find peace in the life you are quietly building. Far away from the noise that once tried to break you, thank you for staying with me. And if this story meant something to you, stay gentle with yourself tonight.